All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I have had one of those weeks where earlier in the week, Jill woke up one morning and she looked at me with this kind of face. She came downstairs and she had this hateful look on her face, and she goes, and I said, "What is wrong with you?" She goes, "I'm mad at you." And I said, "Wait, the day just started. How are you mad at me?" or whatever. And she goes, "You called me a name in my dream last night." And I said, "That was your dream." And she goes, "You said I was a big gal in our dream last night. And you made a comment about my weight." And I said, "Whoa, this is your dream, not mine. You upset with me." So then the next day, I woke up and I have this large knot on the back of my head. I really do. I have a knot on the back of my head. And so somebody said something to me about, "How'd you get that knot on your head?" And I said, "Well, I called my wife a big gal in one of her dreams, and I woke up with a knot on my head." Yeah, I kept calling her big gal the rest of the day, and she didn't enjoy that too much. She was mad at me. All right, so we're gonna be talking about Paul tonight, but Mark was alluding to something earlier about training and his son helping he and his wife and the three of them figure out how to communicate with each other and all that. And so we're going to be talking about training tonight and how important that is. And it is. I don't care if you're 5 years old or you're 95 years old. You still need training. We still are always trying to get better at different things, because getting better at certain things gives us pleasure. It gives us a sense of accomplishment, a sense of satisfaction in how we have done things. And that doesn't mean, it can mean hitting a baseball or shooting a free throw, but it could be baking a cake or doing a presentation or, how you care for your lawn, the flowers you grow, the vegetables you grow, whatever it might be. Training is something we're always doing. My grandfather was a professional sauger fisherman. He only fished for one type of fish, and it was sauger fish. And whenever I went to his house, there were always 3 or 4 guys, never the same people, sitting out either on in a lawn chair or on a bench or on his front porch, and he was telling them, "Here's how you catch sauger." And so he was the authority on that, and people sought him out. Well, he used to swell up with pride because of that, right? Then we gave him a sense of, hey, I'm an expert at something, and people want to be friends with me because of my skill level. And so it doesn't matter how small a thing it is, it can be something that really helps you to accomplish and to live a life that is alive, right? Most of us, if you go to work every day, sometimes it can feel like drudgery. It can feel like, hey, it's the same repetitive day over and over. And if we can get enough training and start to excel in certain things, then all of life becomes better. And it could be excelling as a spouse, excelling as a parent, excelling in a bunch of different ways. Financially, all those things will help us. So tonight we're going to talk about Paul and some of the stuff that happened to him. And we'll start in Acts chapter 9. But I want to ask you some questions, because as soon as Paul gets converted to being a Christian, you'll find Acts chapter 9, beginning in verse 19, Ananias has just laid hands on him, and he's been healed where he was blind for 3 days. He's healed. And then it says, Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. That's not the disciples like the ones that that follow Jesus around. That just means converts to Christianity in that area. That's the small d disciples, right? Not big D, not apostles with an A, right? So he's there with them. So notice that as soon as he gets saved, as soon as he comes to know the Lord, he needs Ananias to lay hands on him and pray for him. And then he goes and spends time with the disciples. I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to be as honest as I possibly can, because I'm an only child. I like to be by myself sometimes. I like to do things on my own, and I'm an individual. My mom and dad, when I was a baby, I would cry, and if they were holding me, I would be crying. If they put me down, I would stop crying. It's the reverse of most babies, right? So for us, sometimes as Christians, we tend to say, I can be a lone wolf. I can do my own thing as a Christian and do it by myself. And I'm going to tell you this is 56 years of experience. You cannot do that. Jesus' ministry, his call, the things that he has in store for us require us to work in coordination with other people. There is no doing Christianity by yourself. You can, it's just not going to be life and life to the full. It's not going to be what you're seeking out of it, the relationship with Jesus. I know that there's so many people right now, especially, who want to go off and live and be a hermit out in the middle of nowhere. And that's just not the calling that Jesus has for us. So notice, he needs Ananias to lay hands on him, and it's God's power that heals him of his blindness. And then he goes and spends time with the disciples, learning what it is to be a new Christian. And it says, at once he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. All those who heard him were astonished and asked, isn't he the man who raised havoc in Jerusalem among those who call on this name? And hasn't he come here to take them as prisoners to the chief priests? Yet Saul grew, G-R-E-W, more and more powerful and baffled the Jews living in Damascus by proving that Jesus is the Messiah. All right, so there's people in this room that are 8 months old, and there's people in this room that are right at 80 or older, right? And so for us, we need to be able to, all of us, write down in a book somewhere, if I'm not growing, I'm what? Dying. If I'm not growing, I'm dying. I try to express that to Jill as I'm eating every day. If I'm not growing, I'm dying, right? But in reality, that is the truth, is that we are learning all the time. And that doesn't mean that we have to continue to get degrees and go to college and all. That's not what I'm talking about. It is part of it. But for us, we need to be growing in our faith, that every day we can experience things in a new and different way. How many of you all who've been Christians most of your life read the Bible, parts of it maybe at 12 years old? Read the Bible, right? And you went, wow, there's something I didn't know, right? 12 years old. Then when you turned 21 and you read some of the Bible, didn't you go, wow, there's something different there. There's something, oh wow, there's something different. And then when you got married or you had kids, you read the Bible maybe at 25, 35 years old, however old you were, and you read the Bible, you went, wow, there's something new that I didn't really get, right? And then you got, maybe to retirement and an empty nester or whatever, and you read the Bible and you went, wow, there's something different there. It's because our situations are changing, who we are is changing. It's not that God is changing, we're just reading things anew, right? We're reading parts maybe we haven't read, or we're reading it from a different perspective. We're no longer a 12-year-old kid. We're no longer single. We're married to somebody, right? We're, whatever it might be. And so we're always growing and knowing God better. And so that's what's happening to Saul. Saul is a new Christian, and he's been a Pharisee. He studied the Old Testament like the back of his hand, but now he knows, he's like, I don't really know what it means to serve Jesus. And that's what he's doing. And he's not doing it by himself. He's doing it in coordination with somebody else. So, let me ask you this. So, if you every single day have a stomach ache, how do you learn not to have a stomach ache? Your mom and dad teach you about nutrition, right? You go to school and there's a class called health maybe, right? That you go to and they say, this is what nutrition ought to be. Timing wise, if I go and I used to, in high school, I dated a girl who was she was Lutheran. And at Christmas, they would go to midnight mass on Christmas Eve, and then they would eat a meal at 2 a.m. A full meal, like everything. They'd have it all laid out, on Christmas Eve. And we're sitting there at like 3 a.m, and I'm eating all this food, and I can remember going home and at like 4 something in the morning, laying down to go to sleep, and I was like, oh, my stomach, whatever. And the timing of when, you're going to have an upset stomach if you eat Mexican food at 11:30 at night, right? There's just certain things. You're going to have weird dreams if you eat lasagna at midnight, right? Those are the timing things that we learn. But we learn about variety. We learn about overeating, right? It took me 10 years to figure out that I didn't have to be miserable after every meal. I love to eat. Oh my goodness, I love to eat. And it was such in my house, that's when we kind of gathered as a family. You know, my grandparents, our aunts and uncles and everybody, we would all get together and eat. And we loved it so much. And we'd sit around the table and just keep eating, you know, and we just keep eating. And you'd get up and everybody would do this. Oh, right? Everybody's got that feeling that, right? You learn those things. And the way that we learn those things is by experiencing them, but also in training, right? That we physically, somebody will tell us something, and we either go, oh, I'm going to put that into practice, or we go, I'm not listening to that. And then experience, trial and error, teaches us a lesson, right? You know what I'm saying? So if my dad is taking me in the car, and he's going, hey, this is what I would do when I drive the car. I'd have my hands at 10 and 2, right? I'd be watching the road. I wouldn't pay attention to any phone. Of course, we didn't have phones, you know what I'm saying, when I was learning to drive. But he would say, you know, I wouldn't go over this speed. And when you go around a curve, you should slow down, you know. Don't be giving it gas as you're not a NASCAR driver, right, when you're going around a curve. He gave me all kinds of advice. And then he got out of the car, and what did I do? What I wanted to do, right? And so did I listen to some of the things that he said? Yes. And the things I listened to, that was good results, right? The stuff that I didn't listen to, what happened? Yeah, I mean, there were things that I learned through experience, trial and error, that were bad things, you know, because how many of you all, okay, Sela has a friend who has been stopped in the Murfreesboro area 3 times in the last 2 months for speeding 30 miles an hour over the speed limit, has not got a ticket yet. 3 times she's been stopped. 30 miles an hour over the speed limit. And I was like, wow, she knows Jesus like this. You know, but you know what I'm saying is that we learn because you hear people say, man, I got a $250 ticket because I was speeding through here, or I ran my car off the road and I hit this, or I had a wreck, or whatever. And those are those trial and error things. Those are the times when we said through the training, we went, no, I'm not going to do what the training told me, right? I'm just going to do what I want to do in this particular sense, or, you know, whatever's going on. So Paul is learning and he's growing, and then I want you to watch what happens, okay? So he's growing more powerful, and then if we keep reading, verse 23 in chapter 9, it says, after many days had gone by, there was a conspiracy among the Jews to kill him. But Saul, now hang on a second. How many verses have passed since we got from Paul's, conversion? It was, I had you start reading in 19, and we're now in 2023, and it says after many days had gone by, there was a conspiracy by the Jews to kill him. 4 verses of being a Christian. He got through 4 verses before somebody was trying to kill him. And as Christians, when we begin to serve Jesus, there's going to be, this training that we go through. And as we try to implement that into our life, what happens? Attack happens. And then when somebody's training you to do something, let's say shoot free throws, or teaching you how to bake, teaching you how to grow something, are you immediately just so successful at it? Most of the time, no. So there is failure that happens pretty quickly in terms of, if I got a kid on my baseball team and he's striking out, and we say, okay, let's go to practice tomorrow and we'll work on some of the things that you need to fix. And so at that practice, we say, you should do this with your hands holding the bat. This should be your stance. This is how you should watch the ball. This is how far you should be from the plate. All those kind of things. The next day we have a game. Is he going to go and get a hit every time he gets up? No. In fact, in baseball, you can be in the Hall of Fame and fail 7 times out of 10. If you're a 300 hitter, you'd be in the Hall of Fame. That means you get a hit 3 times out of 10. So 7 times you fail. So sometimes, failure are those things that, it's a learning experience, and then we can make some adjustments, right? We figure out what was it that I messed up on just then, and all that stuff. Was I smiling for Grandma while she took my picture and strike 3 goes by, right? All those kind of things. All right. So for us, and I have shared this with you before, and it wasn't just one, it was all of my sons went through a period where they kind of refused to take a bath regularly. I'm being honest with you. I mean, we're normal average people. And I would say, you stink, you need to go take a bath. And they'd like play basketball for like 3 hours, and they're getting ready to go lay down in bed. And I was like, you really should go take a bath. You should take a shower. You need to, and they'd get up the next morning and go to school. And I was like, you need to take a shower. And so Jill said, you're going to have to talk to those boys. They stink. And I was like, I don't have to talk to those boys. Have you explained it to them? And she goes, yes. And I said, you've done your job. I said, through trial and error, they're going to figure it out. And when she goes, that's sad, trial and error. I said, let them walk into school and their friends go, you stink really bad, or have a beautiful girl go, I'm not going out with you. You smell like trash. I mean, that changes it immediately. Because as parents, they've heard you say it 52 times that you should take a bath, you should take a bath, you should take a bath. And they're like, you're my parent. I'm going to rebel against that. Those kind of things. All right. So for us, when we're sitting here looking at some of these things, whether it's bad grades, if you get bad grades, and these are all things that we can remedy. Bad grades, fashion sense, wrecks or dents in your car, not making a team, like a cheerleading or a sports or theater or something, getting fired or laid off. How many times do you have friends that do this? Because I have a lot of friends that will say to me, I got fired again. And you go, again? And they go, yep, 13th job I've had this year. And you go, 13th job you've had this year? Why'd you get laid off this time? Was it my fault? My boss didn't like me. It's always something like that. And I go, what happened? And they go, well, they said I had too many sick days. Or they said, there's always some reason for it. But in reality, it's a lack of training. And let me say this. We may have tried to train, right? We've tried to train, but they weren't willing to listen to it, right? And you know what I'm saying? You get the point here? So the same thing is true, is that Jesus is trying to train us, and we go, I don't really want to do that. I'd rather do this instead. And so the results are what? A mess, right? You see what I'm saying? And so for us, Paul's being trained, and immediately, 4 verses in, they're already trying to kill him, is that in our lives, when we start trying to do something new, when there's somebody training us, there's going to be failure that happens. You know what I'm saying? And it may be because, let's take a business, for example. It costs the business lots of money and time and people to be able to train you. And so they're like, okay, this conveyor belt is moving like crazy here, and we need you to step in here. We need another person to do this right here. And they go, okay, well, we need to train a new person. And they go, okay, well, we really don't want to stop the conveyor belt, so you know what I'm saying? We really, right? And so companies shortchange the training, let you jump in here, and then what happens to the product? Product's lousy, right? Because we didn't train the person well enough, and suddenly the guy that's down here supposed to be doing rivets is going, I don't really even know how to hold this gun. What am I supposed to do down here? You know what I'm saying? And so the product, the finished thing is not good. Everybody shake their heads this way, right? You know what I mean? It's what we're talking about. All right, so each one of those things, you can talk about breakups. You can talk about no friends. I have people all the time who say things to me like, I don't have a lot of friends. And I would say I've said the same thing to my kids, is you have to be a friend. You have to be a friend to have a friend, right? What you're putting into it, in terms of relationships, what you're offering, that comes before somebody being your friend, how you treat them. One of my sons had a girlfriend, and we were sitting in the living room, and she got up to walk into the kitchen, and she said, Miss Jill, can I have something to drink? And Jill's like, yeah, get whatever you want to out of the fridge. And my son goes, hey, give me a sandwich while you're in there. And I went, so bad. Let me just give you a piece of advice. I leaned over to him. I go, she's going to break up with you in a week. Less than that, probably. And he goes, no, she loves me. That's what he said. He goes, she loves me. And I was like, I'm just going to give you a piece of advice. And then less than a couple of weeks, he's, no, she broke up with me. And I said, you can see that coming. You can see that coming a long way off. It's part of the training, right? It's part of you aren't willing to listen to, and that's that selfishness within us sometimes. We want to make our own decisions. We want to make all this stuff, right? That's what we want to do. And so here we have, let's look at a little bit more of Paul here, because I want to show you some of what goes on in his life. It says, and this is going to be one of our main points tonight, is we just read Acts 9, and we got most of the, let me just read a little bit more here before we leave Acts 9, because there's one more place I'm going to have you read. All right, so look at, it said they tried to kill him, so verse 25, but his followers took him by night and lowered him. Notice his followers, right? This is more people together again. Took him by night, lowered him in a basket through an opening in the wall. When he came to Jerusalem, he tried to rejoin the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he really was a disciple. Now, you remember what we talked about on Sunday between Genesis and Exodus? the time difference between those last verse and the first verse, 400 years between Genesis and Exodus. So right there, in between those verses, something had happened, all right? Let me show you what had happened. Let's go to Galatians 1. Everybody turn over to Galatians 1, just a few books over. Okay, so it's Galatians 1, 13. It says, "For you have heard of my this is Galatians 1, 13. So to the church in Galatia, that's an area, region. It's not a specific city. It says, "For you have heard of my previous way of life," this is Paul writing, in Judaism, "how intensely I persecuted the church of God and tried to destroy it. I was advancing in Judaism beyond many of my own age among my people and was extremely zealous for the traditions of my fathers. But when God, who set me apart from my mother's womb and called me by his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son in me so that I might preach him among the Gentiles, my immediate response was not to consult any human being. I did not go up to Jerusalem to see those who were apostles before I was, but I went into Arabia. Later, I returned to Damascus. Then, after 3 years, I went to Jerusalem to get acquainted with Cephas." That's Peter, right? So, between those verses where it said he was about to be killed and all that kind of stuff, and it says, "Then we went to Jerusalem," at least 3 years have passed. At least 3 years. It says, and I want you to get this, because the first, if we're looking for these kind of, these action steps that we can put into place, the first one would be the quest for quiet. For 3 years, notice, how long were the disciples trained, the 12? How long were they trained by Jesus?
3 years.
3 years. And so here we just read in Galatians, Paul says, "After I was saved, I went to Damascus and I preached for a while. They tried to kill me." 4 verses, right? And then I went to Arabia. It says 3 years. Between Damascus and Arabia, he spent 3 years just training, just finding quiet and letting God kind of share with him. And so for us, the immediate thing for us is we think, okay, I need to, when I become a Christian, I need to make sure that I'm in a Sunday school class. Absolutely, I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. But you need to also find time by yourself somewhere, the quest for quiet, that you can each day sit and pray. Not only pray, because again, when I say the word pray, we always think of this list that we've got of things that we need. You know, Dixie's got a kidney issue. We need to pray for Dixie. And Bobby Johnson's got back surgery. We got to pray for him. And Patsy's got a gallbladder. I'm going to pray for her. Those are all great things. But at some point in our prayer time, we need to close our mouth and listen. And I'm not saying that God's going to go, "Heidi, I've got to say." No, I don't know. Maybe he will. He's spoken out loud to lots of people. He's never done that for me. I've told you about plenty of times that God has spoken to me in a lot of different ways, whether through others or the Bible or whatever it might be. I've never had animals speak to me like, Balaam's donkey. No raccoon has ever come up to me and go, "God's will is this for you." No, I've never had an animal. But in the Bible, there are plenty of those kind of examples, right? So, but the quest for quiet is where we can just sit. And, Heidi has shared in our Sunday school class before, because it's kind of my thing too, is to sit in a chair at the beach or in a rocking chair on the porch of a cabin up in the mountains and just sit there and let that breeze hit you, because it's the same breeze that's at the beach, the one that's hitting you when you're up in the mountains and you're sitting on that porch, is that there, in the stillness of that, man, you just recharge, don't you? It's just a moment where you look around you, and it's easy for me in those moments. If I sit on my front porch at my house where I'm at now, it's not the same, right? It's not the same. But if I'm sitting there and the ocean is lapping up at my feet and I can watch the sunset and the breeze and the birds and whatever it might be, the kids playing in the sand, I can sit there and go, "Wow, look at God and all of the things that I see here." If I'm sitting in that rocking chair, I can look and that hawk's over the top of the mountains there, doing this, and the blue sky and the white clouds, and God's creation of the forest, and just all of that is just unbelievable. But I have to have that quest for quiet to be able to find those moments. And so in your house, on your back porch or your front porch, we've got to be able to do that. Or in our car, man, that's the worst place for me to try to pray, right? "Dear Lord, give me a heart for," "Hey, move out of the way." You dirty dog, move out of the, it's that kind of thing. So we have to find that place of quiet. And so for 3 years, Paul is there with Jesus teaching him, God speaking to him, laying it out for him. All right? So if we start with quest for quiet, then the second thing is one that I've already mentioned, which is people are a plus. People add to our life. They don't take away from it. And I can say that, and I had a dad that tried to kill my mom and myself, right? But I still see people as a plus. Is that I've played team sports my entire life. And one of the cool things is you learn to lean on each other, right? You build friendships in doing stuff, not only in sports, but at church. Some of your best memories are doing stuff. I've sat in this building, and really and truthfully, I've been here almost 3 years at this point, and I've sat with people who've been here for 30 years, and they said, I can remember when we did this here. And a big smile on their face. I remember when we had all these kids here, and when we had the youth here doing this, and we did this, and we did this, and we did this, and it's a smile on their face. You remember when so-and-so was here, and so-and-so was here, and this family, and we did this, and it's all those memories of doing stuff together. So people are a plus, and Jesus tells us that without a doubt. When he sent his disciples out, how did he send them? Pairs. 2 by 2, right? And then also, when he spoke, it was usually in groups of people, right? He was doing group training pretty much everywhere he went. And for us, the idea is when you're in school, even in the first grade, they're doing group projects. Group projects. That used to be when you go to college, you had to do a group project. But now it's pretty much every age group is having to do group projects. So people are a plus. And again, even if we're in the group, we did Quest for Quiet, but people are a plus. Even when we're with people, the same premise applies that we should listen more than we speak. Listen more than we speak. And we used to have a guy that helped with our youth group when I was at Tusculum, and the kids called him Mr. Know-It-All. That's how they referred to him behind his back. They never called him, they were like, oh yeah, Mr. Know-It-All. Because you would say, I was thinking about getting a Jeep. Oh, Jeeps are great cars. The Jeep was discovered by Wilfred Brimley, and and he would go in this big long. I know. It would be some big long spiel about who invented the Jeep and how it started out, and the first Jeep was built in Fairmont, Massachusetts in 1792. He'd start talking, the kids would go, Mr. Know-It-All's at it again, right? They hated his guts. And so listening is learn from that. Listening is so much, but we tend to want to, and it's a Caldwell thing too. We want to share all the information that's in our head. But people don't want that. They want you to listen to them. All right. So now, the third one would be don't let fear be a phobia. Don't let fear be a phobia. Don't let failure be a phobia. Don't let failure be a phobia. And what I'm talking about there is that anything that you do, I spent most of my childhood being afraid of everything. I was an only child, so at night I was scared to death because I had no brother or sister to, older or younger, that I could lean on. And so just the idea of whatever it might be, I kind of had to, got to the point in my life where I had a fear of failure. That anything would be just this monumental failure. And in all actuality, just like we talked about in baseball, that most everything that we do, we're going to fail at some point. Even, how many of you all, your grandma, right? Your grandma or your aunt, or whoever it was in your life that was the greatest cook you ever met, at some point they burnt something, and they came out and they went, I don't know what happened there. Or their cake fell, or whatever, right? They came out and they were like, I'm sorry to say this. And you're like, wow, that's it. We fail. There's certain things. How many of you all have done, whether it's raising some kind of flower or some kind of vegetable, and you've done everything you think is right, and it gets to the final end and no flower or no vegetables, and you go, I did every step right. What happened? And that's the part where sometimes we miss this last step, right? When you do all the things on a farm right, when you do every step, and there's like 50 steps to get to harvest, and sometimes there's not a harvest. Is that we miss that part in the Bible where Paul says it's God that makes it grow, right? It's God that makes it grow. And we tend to think, okay, I'm going to force God's hand. I'll do everything right, and then I'm going to get the result I want, this big, huge, 100-fold harvest. And so we just have to keep in mind that idea of don't let failure be a phobia. All right, so, and then I want you to see something with me in terms, let's go back to chapter 9 of Acts. And we're going to look at some of what Paul did here just to kind of keep moving along. So look at Acts, let's do Acts 11:22, okay? So we're close to where we were. 11:22. And it's not that a lot of time has passed here, but we're going to see what goes on. Okay, so it says, let's pick up in 19. So 11:19, sorry. Acts 11:19. It said, now those who'd been scattered by the persecution that broke out when Stephen was killed, which Paul was related in, right? He was in the middle of that. Traveled as far as Phoenicia, Cyprus, and Antioch, spreading the word only among Jews. Some of them, however, men from Cyprus and Cyrene, went to Antioch and began to speak to Greeks also, telling them the good news about the Lord Jesus. The Lord's hand was with them, and a great number of people believed and turned to the Lord. News of this reached the church in Jerusalem, and they sent Barnabas to Antioch. When he arrived and saw what the grace of God had done, he was glad and encouraged them all to remain true to the Lord with all their hearts. He was a good man, full of the Holy Spirit and faith, and a great number of people were brought to the Lord. Then Barnabas went to Tarsus, that's Paul's hometown, Saul's hometown, so he became Paul, to look for Saul, and when he found him, he brought him to Antioch. So for a whole year, Barnabas and Saul met with the church and taught great numbers of people. The disciples were called Christians first at Antioch. Notice the wheel rolling, okay? I was the learner, and then now, who am I?
Teacher.
The teacher. That's the natural progression is that as I grow, that I was trained by somebody, now I'm training somebody else. That's called discipleship. Okay? That is something that we're called to, so that it doesn't mean that this is not me trying to raise up volunteers for children's church. That's not what I'm doing here, right? The idea, though, is that as we grow, that there is somebody else that we are training, and this repetitiveness, this is a repetition that happens in our Christian life. Well, everything in our life, if you're looking for this, if you're looking for success in your life, repetition reaps a harvest. Repetition reaps a harvest. Is that if I can learn to do things the same way, the right way, then I will find success. Let me give you an example. So, first, second, third, fourth grade, I struggled in school. I had to do kindergarten twice because I wasn't the smartest tool in the shed, right? I had to do it 2 years because somehow I wasn't ready to move to Miss Jill's first grade class, right? I just wasn't ready. And so I struggled in school, and what I figured out is that I would get report cards that said, has lots of potential, needs to quit visiting with neighbors, needs to pay attention, quit looking out the window, needs to, right? I mean, these are all these things where he could be making A's, but we have found him to be more concerned with writing on his desk, or, right, and all these kind of things. And I think James Myers and I both said, I got paddled in the first grade by the principal, not by the teacher, by the principal with one of those big wooden paddles. I was like, who gets paddled in the first grade? Right here, on more than one occasion. And like James said, when I went home, I got it again at the house. And so once I got to about fourth grade, because I would go home, take that report card and go, oh, golly, it's report card day. I have to take this and show it. They have to sign that thing, you know, and I was trying to figure out how you can forge. How do you turn an F into an A? How can you, what kind of pen do I need to do that? Or what, you know what I'm saying? Those kind of things. And so finally, about the fourth grade, one of my teachers said, if you'll just do this and this and this, you'll make better grades. And I went, so? And she goes, then your parents wouldn't yell at you. And I go, they wouldn't yell at me if I did this and this and this. And so I tried it for a little while. I made a good grade. I went home and my mom went, you made an A. Oh my goodness. Give me a big hug. We're going to Dairy Queen. Let's go. You know? And I'm like, I'm liking this better than the spankings. I'm liking this better than being grounded. This seems to be a better life, right? And that light bulb went off, literally. And so when we start repetitively learning to, you know, the teacher handed me a book. She expects me to read it, right? There's homework. And I went home and I did the homework. And then I showed up for the quiz or the test. And I did good. Mom, I don't know what's happened, but it's great. God has intervened in your life. And now you're a smart kid now or whatever. It was all about just repetition. It's the same in everything. Everything. It's not just sports. It is exactly the same. If you're learning and you're on the assembly line, the repetition of it makes you better at it, right? Doing it over and over. If you don't believe me, then there are so many examples of, somebody said to me one time, they said, who's the best basketball player that you know? And I said, Pistol Pete Maravich. And they went, you're crazy. Michael Jordan is the greatest player ever. And then LeBron's right there. They're like this right here. How can you say Pistol Pete? And I said, because he was a nobody and he was just a gym rat that did nothing but shoot the basketball from about 100 different places. And he just got better and better through repetition. And I said, he just worked at it. He worked really hard at it. And I said, he was not the greatest basketball player of all time. But I said, he is somebody that I really admired in terms of his work ethic. But it's about repetition. When they interviewed Greg Norman when he won the Masters and they stuck the mic in his face and they said, how come you were able to do this today? Why are you such a good golfer? And he goes, well, I hit 5,000 golf balls a day. And I went, 5,000 golf balls a day? I mean, I go to the driving range, my kids will go, hey, let's go to the driving range, Dad. And we go buy a bucket that has 100 balls in it. When we get done, I'm like, I can't lift my arms because I've hit 100 golf balls, right? And he goes, I hit 5,000 a day. And I went, the repetition of, let's be honest, he's not doing it wrong 5,000 times. He's listening to his golf coach who says, you should do this when you hit a golf ball. And he's doing that 5,000 times. That is absolutely true for everything that we do, is that the way that we do things, if we repetitively get to where it becomes just kind of our, this is the natural instinct, then we see success in all different areas of our life. You can try that. Put it into practice, and you can see. So in Paul's life, what you find as you read through the book of Acts, when you're seeing Paul's life, it's this. It's a cyclical thing. It's over and over. It's the things that go on in his life. So let's look at it. Let's just look at the next one. So look at 11:30. So we did 22 through 26. We read that. So look at 11:30. And it says there was a famine in the land. And it says that they took they took funds and stuff to Jerusalem. It says this they did, sending their gifts to the elders by Barnabas and Paul. And then skip down to 12:25 because there's a story about Peter. And then look at 12:25. So this is picking up a little bit after that next story. And it says, this is the last verse of chapter 12. It says, when Barnabas and Saul had finished their mission, they returned from Jerusalem, taking with them John, and it says also called Mark. It says, now in the church at Antioch there were prophets and teachers, Barnabas, Simeon called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, who had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. While they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I've called them. So after they had fasted and prayed, they placed their hands on them and sent them off. The two of them were sent on their way by the Holy Spirit, went down to Seleucia, sailed from there to Cyprus. When they arrived at Salamis, they proclaimed the word of God in the Jewish synagogues. John was with them as their helper. They traveled through the whole island until they came to Paphos. There they met a Jewish sorcerer, false prophet named Bar-Jesus, who was an attendant of the proconsul, Sergius Paulus. The proconsul, an intelligent man, sent for Barnabas and Saul because he wanted to hear the word of God. But Elymas, the sorcerer, for that is what his name means, opposed them and tried to turn the proconsul from the faith. Conflict. Again, this idea of when we do God's will, that something happens, and this is true for us in every aspect of our life, health-wise. When you're going to go and you're going to get in shape, you decide, you make that decision. You come to that, at that point in your life where you're either fed up or where it clicks and you go, I need to get in shape for my health, or I need to get in shape for this reason, whatever it might be. As soon as you start working out or as soon as you start eating right, what happens?
Your husband
Everybody,
brings home ice cream.
do what?
Your husband brings home ice cream.
Your husband brings home ice cream. That has happened. I will say that. He's a fine man, though, your husband. Every single time that we decide to get in shape and we go to the gym, after about 3 workouts or maybe even 2 workouts, we're like so sore, so stiff, we pulled a muscle, whatever it might be, right? And it's that failure thing that's coming up, right? Or as soon as, I promise you, as soon as I say I'm going to eat better, I'm going to go on some kind of diet, I'm going to do all these things better, then Patsy will call and she'll say, Jans and I have really wanted to have you all over for a long time, and Jans is making steaks, and I'm going to make these twice baked potatoes, and we're going to have all this, and I've made peach pie, and I've made, and we go over there, and I go, right? But I'd made that decision, and then there was failure that came, right? Because I'm just learning. I'm just putting these things into practice, right? When your kid learned to ride a bicycle, how many times, if you have children, right? How many times were you there holding on to the back of the seat? It was for a while, right? A while until, because they're like, don't let go. Whatever you do, don't let go. And then they're like, no. Put the training wheels back on. Put the training wheels back on. I want the training wheels for a while. And then take the training wheels off, and then finally, you let it go. But how many times did that bike fall over, right? You know what I'm saying? There's that failure aspect that happens as we're learning, as we're growing. So we tend to think, I love it when people sign up to teach children in church or they teach youth and they go in and they're so excited and they go, well, tell them about Jesus and it's going to change their life forever. And you're sitting there talking and the kids are talking amongst themselves. You're going, I want to tell you about Jesus and his, that he's walking on water or whatever. And they're over there going, and you're like, this could be the rudest group of people I've ever been with, right? You know what I'm saying? And it devastates you. And yet, if you give up, what has happened? Okay, watch this. In 3rd grade, my middle son, Caleb, we had a baseball game, and he hit a baseball to the outfield, and it bounced up, and it hit a kid in the mouth and knocked his tooth out right here onto the ground. And Caleb's team lost the game, and Caleb came home, and he goes, I don't want to play this anymore. I'm quitting. And I went, no, you're not. And Jill goes, no, we're not going to quit or whatever. So we played another game, and he goes, I hate this. I don't want to play this anymore. Knocked that boy's tooth out. We're not winning. It's not fun. I want to quit. Like 3rd grade. And Jill kind of, later that night, we're kind of lying there in bed, and she goes, we probably should let him quit. He's hating it. He's not really enjoying it at all. It's not very fun. Why would we force him to do whatever? And I said, we'll finish out the season, and he doesn't have to play anymore. I said, but we're not quitting. We signed up for this, and we're going to play. He won a state championship in baseball as a high school student because he stayed with it. After the season was over, by the end of the season, he was doing well, the team was doing well, and he stuck with it for 4th grade, and he just kept going. If I had let him quit that day when he wanted to quit, he would have never experienced being carried off the field. They're carrying each other off the field and winning a state championship at MTSU's field over here. And so for us, we need to learn a lesson from that, in that when something is hard to do, right, we tend to want to quit. And God says, hey, there's going to be plenty of times, remember that failure thing, there's going to be plenty of times where we're going to not do great. It's not going to seem, and that's the other part of it, is learn the difference between real failure and perceived failure. Because you may be training somebody and you think, golly, this person they got a knot on their head. They're not getting this. Yeah, it's a box of rocks. They're not getting this, right? Whatever. And then their life, you're like, suddenly they blossom and you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that this happened, right? That this changed, that their life was transformed in this way. But notice the repetition of the things that Paul is doing and what happened, that there's some kind of conflict, they overcome the conflict, people get saved, then they move on to the next town. And then they're sharing the gospel, and then there's conflict, and then people get saved, and they leave that town, they move to the next town. That there's this repetition, they're learning how to interact with people and to share the gospel in certain ways. All right. So the last action step for the night, our attitude affects our outcomes. It's actually the faith that we have is, and I would ask, I think Sam's on the phone out there, but does God take care of you?
Yeah.
In all circumstances? Does he take care of you? Absolutely. And there are people who would say, no, he doesn't. And yet, when we're totally dependent on him, he provides for us. And this is not for you to sign up to quit all your jobs and say, I'm just going to let God provide. We're just going to sit at the house. I'm not going to do anything. God will deliver the groceries here, right? That's not what I'm saying. You're right. The Bible is real clear to say, if you don't work, you don't eat, right? It is that. But God does care for us, and so he's always working for our good. Romans 8:28 tells us that. And so if that's the case, if he asks us to do something, then how's it going to turn out? good. It's going to turn out good. And yet we sit around going, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, right? We worry, we stress, we strain, all those kind of things. And yet God always provides. God always takes care of the situation. And so, I've sat and looked through all of this. And in terms of our training part, you have kind of on-the-job training, you have life experiences, you have trial and error, you have classroom training, you have one-on-one training, you have training by watching like TV or movies or that kind of stuff. Those are all ways in which we learn and we grow. We get training on how to do things. And God is constantly working on us and wanting us to become the people that He wants us to be. And that doesn't mean that, because some of us feel like a shame. There's a shame that we carry around because we're not there yet. This is all we are right now. And yet He made you for this moment, right? This is where He wants you right now. And so many of us will go, oh man, I can't wait till Vacation Bible School. We could really do some ministry there. We don't have to wait till Vacation Bible School, right? We don't have to wait till Sunday to do ministry, right? I mean, because we do that. We go, can't wait till Sunday. We're going to do some ministry on Sunday. I don't have to wait till Sunday, do I? Right? I don't have to wait till Sunday. It's every day it's ministry in some way, shape, or form. And so for us, we need to kind of make sure that we are getting not only the training that we need, but that we are training other people. Because I think this, right here, what we're talking about, is why the culture that my kids are in right now is so messed up. Because we did not train them very well. My kids were in church every Sunday, and they still struggle in terms of their walk with Christ and some of those kind of things. And I go, how come they're struggling? And some of us would say, oh, it's only because they're 20 or whatever. No, I just talked to a lady the other day whose 39-year-old son has just train wrecked their family and hadn't been a problem until 39. And I'm like, by the time they get to 39, they're not my responsibility anymore. That is not my responsibility, right? But you understand what I'm saying is that for us, we have to do a better job of training children to know who God is and what God can do, because this whole generation that's coming up, they just don't believe in that stuff. They don't buy in. And that's because we haven't trained them in the right way. For me, this is how I've trained my kids at times. I just get my voice louder and louder and louder. Oh yeah? Oh yeah? Oh yeah? Right? You're going to listen to me now. Right? No.
Get quieter.
Quieter, right? But it's part of that training. And, Abby and John are sitting here with this beautiful little girl. Sam and Kinsey are sitting here, beautiful little girl. Brandy and Chris are sitting there, beautiful little boy. And they're sitting there going, okay, I'm responsible for training this child. And how are we going to do that? And it's our responsibility too. How are we going to do that? And that's part of what goes on in Paul's life is what we're going to try to recreate in their lives. We're going to get those cycles into place where people can learn and grow and make assessments and adjustments and evaluate and whatever it takes to get them to the point where they're fully functioning Christians for Jesus, living out the life He's called us to. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for the evening, and we thank you that you are at work in our lives. Lord, there's so many different things in terms of training and us learning, and sometimes we're just so hard-headed and rebellious that we don't want to listen to it. And the results are pitiful, and we experience a lot of trauma in our lives because of simple us not listening to the people who are trying to train us, the people who are trying to help us, and through life experiences and wisdom. And Lord, help us to be not only being trained ourselves, but to be willing to train other people. And I just pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you. Thanks for being here tonight, joining.